Hello everyone, welcome to another Digimon video, bringing you another deck profile for the English BT04 format. This time with the purple color, and I'm here to tell you that this is probably the most aggressive purple deck you will have ever seen in this format. We're going to be doing this on Tabletop Simulator because I don't physically have the cards myself, so I hope you guys bear with me. But as you can see, the deck itself is going to be focusing on the two Cerberusmon, right here, regular Cerberusmon and the Cerberusmon Werewolf mode. Let's get to it. Similar to my previous deck profile video, we will be going over the main focus of the deck. So, as mentioned prior, the main focus of the deck right here is we run 4 copies of the level 5 Cerberusmon. Now what does Cerberusmon do? He is normally 6,000 power, which is a relatively no number for a level 5, but he is a cost 6 to hard play normally, which is actually a very good cost, considering that, as mentioned before, this game does not have a mulligan, so having a option to hard play an ultimate for 6 cost is relatively cheap. And what is his main ability? He has no other inheritable effects. His only main effect is on deletion. Trigger, draw 2, and then you trash 1 from your hand. This is very similar to the rookie Gabumon that Purple already owns, but this is now on an ultimate itself. So, you'll have no reason not to just swing with this at security, and if it does die, you will trigger a draw 2, pitch 1, which is very useful for cycling through your deck in order to find the combo pieces you need. And if we see the next other Cerberusmon in this deck, you'll see why this effect can be so useful. And as for the other main focus of the deck, we do run 4 copies of the other Cerberusmon, Cerberusmon Werewolf mode. My apologies for Tabletop Simulator not making it very visible. I think that's good enough. So Cerberusmon Werewolf mode is a 9 cost to hard play normally, which is normally very expensive, but it is 9,000 power, which is relatively high. That means when you swing with it, it is more likely to survive insecurity. Now what does the Cerberusmon Werewolf mode do? Well, he actually has 2 abilities here. His first ability is Rush, which means the turn that he comes into play, he can attack that same turn, which will be very useful when we see the combos of the deck. And the second effect is on play, you may delete one of your Cerberusmons to gain 9 memory. So what that means is he basically pays for itself. When you hard play this card, you can sack a base Cerberusmon in order to gain 9 memory, so it pays for its own cost, and you didn't have to spend any memory in order to get him onto the field. And he can swing with that same turn as well. So ideally what you want to do is have the opportunity to swing with your base Cerberusmon, and if he manages to live in security, you'll be able to call your Cerberusmon Werewolf mode to get another swing at your opponent's security, while also allowing you to draw 2 and pitch 1 card. Now, even if you didn't want to do that, you could just hard play this normally and sack a regular Cerberusmon, because it is a risk to swing with your regular Cerberusmon, because you want to take advantage of the 9 memory you'll gain with Werewolf mode. But if you do manage to get lucky, this is a very, very aggressive combo. And if you do it the safe way, you'll still be able to get your cycles in, which is very useful in this game in general. Rounding off the ultimates, we do run 1 copy of a Chimeramon still. It is still a useful card to have, as Purple is known for its control mechanic. However, this deck is not as much control oriented, that's why we don't really need to see that many Chimeramons, but it is still a decent card to have on the off chance we don't see our pieces. We can always sack a Cerberusmon if we so desired in order to kill one of our opponent's level 5 or below, which is a pretty wide range of targets for Purple to kill, and killing a Cerberusmon will allow us to draw 2 cards and pitch 1 if need be. We mentioned before that the Cerberusmon is our main focus of the deck, so it's kind of clear that this is more of an ultimate rush kind of deck. But what are the level 6s that we play? Well, this one's a little bit on the expensive side, but we do run 4 copies of the Lilithmon. For you guys who don't know what Lilithmon does, she has 2 abilities here. The first ability is, on Digivolution, if you have 10 or more cards in your trash, you may return up to 2 purple option cards from your trash to your hand. Now this is actually a very useful effect because it allows us to recycle our options that we will be using, and these options are mainly used for like play extending or even cards that can be used to win the game. Now the second ability is a very useful effect as well, which is once per turn when you use an option card you gain 2 memory. So we do also run the Jackraid in this deck, which is the equivalent of Hammer Spark. So using this card will allow us to potentially gain 3 memory in a turn, and that is very useful for extending our plays in order to try to kill our opponent as soon as humanly possible. And that is why we run 4 copies. However, those aren't the only level 6s we run in this deck. We also run 2 copies of the brand new level 6 that was released in BT04, Cerberusmon. Now, what does he do? He is 3 cost to evolve normally and 10,000 DP, which is relatively on the lower side. However, he has 2 very nifty effects. Its first effect is on Digivolution, you may play 1 level 3 Digimon card from your trash without paying its memory cost, which is very useful if you wanted to swarm the board, but its second ability is what's really useful in that when you play a Digimon from your trash, that Digimon will gain Rush for the turn. So this in itself can allow us to get ourselves another swing at our opponent if we want to use it to close the game. We don't need to see it that often, considering that it's only useful at near the end game stages, but at 2 copies it makes it very likely to see, especially with how much we will draw and cycle through our deck thanks to the Cerberusmon engine. So you can imagine it, you'll be swinging with your Cerberusmon, and if it manages to live, you get to hard play your Cerberusmon werewolf mode in order to get another swing at your opponent, and if you just so happen to live, which is fairly likely if you're 9,000 DP, you'll get to evolve into this Cerberusmon and get yourself another rookie on the field, and then getting another swing at your opponent. A total of 3 swings on your opponent, and that is pretty much of a sign of how aggressive this deck can be. Moving on to level 4s, we do run 4 copies of the brand new level 4 Digimon that came with the purple trial deck on the release of BT04. Now, this Digimon is very useful. It's just a 1 cost blocker on attack -2 memory. Very simple. Its main purpose is just for us to turbo into our ultimates, and also having the opportunity to starve our opponent with only 1 memory spent is a very useful card. If you are interested in playing purple competitively, I will highly suggest you get yourself 2 copies of the purple trial deck, similar to what I said for my black deck profile, because the purple trial deck only comes with 2 copies each. While we're on the topic of blockers, we do run 4 copies of the Vilemon, which is a very basic blocker that every color has. The reason why we run 4 copies here is because this deck is very aggro and it doesn't really run any of the option cards that control our opponent's board. That's why it's very important that running 8 blockers like this is how we can potentially stall the game if we need it, or have some form of defense while we're trying to be aggro as much as possible with our Cerberusmons. Rounding off our level 4s, we do run 3 copies of the regular Digimon. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with what Digimon does, he has 2 costs to evolve normally and 4,000 DP, and 2 abilities. Its main ability is Retaliation, which is essentially Death Touch. If this Digimon is deleted after losing a battle, it deletes the Digimon it was battling. The same applies for its inheritable effect. Now, this is how we get a little bit of control against our opponent's board if we're not exactly having the bestest of hands, and this is also a very good card when countering against specific matchups such as the green OTK deck, because they would want to stack all their security attacks onto their 1 Digimon and then go into the Chaosmon to swing over your guys in order to wipe your opponent's security all in 1 turn. But having this card on the board can simply prevent your opponent from wanting to do so, because they don't want to lose their Chaosmon or their big Mega so easily. Moving on to level 3s, we run 4 copies of the Gabumon. A very useful card if I do say so myself. What does Gabumon do? He has 1 simple ability, which is inheritable. On deletion, trigger draw 2 and then trash 1 card from your hand. Now, where have we heard that before? I'll tell you, it's the exact same effect as the Cerberusmon. However, it is an inheritable effect, which means if you have this as an inheritable for your regular Cerberusmon, when you sacrifice that Cerberusmon for your Cerberusmon werewolf mode, you'll be able to potentially draw 4 cards and only pitch 2. An insane amount of cycle for the deck. Yeah, that is exactly why we won 4 copies of this card, so that's so we managed to see all the pieces we ever want to see. A very useful card if I do say so myself. For the other level 3s we play in this deck, we do run 4 copies of the Tamers. Now this is a very useful card in purple in general, because it has a simple ability of on deletion, trigger draw 1 as a main effect. Now, as mentioned before, this is a very aggressive deck for purple, so having the option to start swinging as soon as a rookie is incredibly useful, because you can just swing with this Tamers and not have to worry about dying, because you'll be able to draw 1 and cycle through your deck, and it's also very useful in case you are missing some potential pieces like a werewolf mode or a regular Cerberusmon and you can't do the full combo right away. And that is why I run with this at 4 copies, because it's just so useful. Our next level 3 that we run is a bit of a interesting choice. We run 3 copies of the Digimon here. This is actually pretty useful in today's meta, considering that there are a lot of cards out there that can gain memory now, not just simply blue. If you guys aren't familiar with Digimon, it's the exact same effect as the Chumon. During all turns, your opponent cannot gain memory except with Tamer effects. So what this means is if they try to use Blinding Ray or a Hammer Spark, they will not be able to gain said memory, which is very useful if you want to try to memory starve your opponent. This is also very useful in the mirror matchup as well, so if you're trying to out-aggro the other Cerberusmon player, getting this card as soon as possible is going to be incredibly useful in order to make sure your opponent can't do their key plays. A very useful card, if I do say so myself. Rounding off our level 3s, we run 3 copies of the Candlemon. The Candlemon is a very useful card for the same reason why we run the Digimon. It is essentially just to memory starve our opponent, having the opportunity to just pay 2 costs, potentially giving my opponent only 1 or even 2 memory. It can be very useful, and it also has a relatively high DP, so it's not expected to live, but it does have a chance to survive in security, and that is essentially why we run this at 3 copies. For the Digitamons, we do run ourselves 4 copies of the Demi-Meramon. It is a very useful card as well if you guys aren't familiar. On deletion, trigger draw 1 and then trash 1 from your hand. Essentially a draw 1, pitch 1. This is our main Digitama of the deck because it allows us to cycle through our deck a lot more in order to make sure that we never brick. It is essentially just a consistency card. And as for our tech Digitama, we do run 1 copy of the Xiaomon. Now, what does this Digitama do? It has the inheritable effect of, during your turn, while there are 10 or more cards in your trash, this Digimon gains Retaliation. Now, this is a pretty solid tech spot to have. This could be any Digitama you ever so desired, but the reason why we run this card is because it essentially allows us to turn any of our blockers into a blocker with Retaliation. Very useful if you want to slow our opponent down. Granted, it does require you to have 10 or more cards in your trash already in order to trigger this ability, and that is why we run this at 1 copy, because it's only useful in the late stages of the game. So we run it at 1, so it's less likely to be seen. For the Tamers, we do run 2 copies of the Matte Ishida. It is our main Tamer that we want to have in order to set our memory to 3 to make sure we don't get memory starved. And it is a very useful card just to allow us to recycle our option cards and or our Digimons in case we're missing anything. So if there was a Cerberusmon or an option card that we wanted to reuse, Matte Ishida allows us to do so. We only run 2 copies because it does require a trash in order for us to get the full value of it. For the option cards, we do run 4 copies of the Jack Raid as previously mentioned. This is a very simple card. Main effect, gain 1 memory for every 10 cards in your trash. And on security, gain 2 memory. So this is essentially a Hammer Spark for purple. It does require you to have at least 10 cards in your trash to get the full value of it. However, what people fail to realize is that you can still play this card even if you don't have 10 cards in your trash. Now, why would that be relevant? Well, as mentioned before, we do run the Lilithmon in this deck. And Lilithmon does say if you do play an option card once per turn, gain 2 memory. So even if you did not have 10 cards in your trash right away, you will be able to use this card and gain 2 memory, similar to like how a Blinding Ray is able to gain 2 memory for yellow. And then obviously the second ability gains 2 memory on the opponent's turn, allows us to potentially end our opponent's turn if they aren't careful, and that is why it is run at 4 copies. A very useful play extender card, if you will. Finally, we run 4 copies of the option card released in BT03 or set 1.5. You play in the English format, Necrophobia. Now what does Necrophobia do? It has 1 ability, which is main effect, play 1 level 5 purple Digimon from your trash without paying its memory cost. Any on-play effects on the Digimon played with this effect don't activate. And if you check this in security, activate the main effect. Now this is actually very useful considering that we will be sacrificing our ultimates very often, aka the Cerberusmon and or the werewolf mode. So what this will allow us to do is essentially set up a Cerberusmon combo for the next turn, which is very nice. And if you combine it with the Lilithmon, this can only cost 3 memory, which is a relatively cheap number, especially if you have the Matte Ishida already on the field. You're not only limited to just calling the basic Cerberusmon, mind you. You can always call the Cerberusmon werewolf mode, and because Cerberusmon werewolf mode's rush ability is a continuous effect, you can still attack with it the turn you play it. So this is almost a makeshift Anubismon, if you will, to try to swing at our opponent for a game. Very, very aggressive, which is the main focus of this deck entirely. And that is going to be it for our Digimon TCG BT04 Aggro Purple Deck profile. If you managed to get this far in the video, maybe consider subscribing. If you have any questions or any future deck profiles you want me to cover in the future, please let me know in the comments down below. Alright, that's the end of the video. Bye-bye!